Yeah.
Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to Planning Committee. As I always say at this point, this is a quasi-judicial meeting and no decisions have been made in advance. The members of the Planning Committee sit here as representatives of the whole council rather than representing their wards, and do not enjoy parliamentary privilege in respect of comments made during this meeting. We do have speakers on some items today, and as usual, the total time allowed for objection or for support for an application is 3 minutes. I don't believe we have any sharing arrangements today, so each of the speakers will have 3 minutes, which will be managed by Sean, as usual. Turning to the agenda then, the first item is the notice of recording and webcast. This meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the Council's meeting YouTube site, which is a very long reference, which you can either click on from the agenda or just go to YouTube and look for Birmingham City Council meetings. And members of the press and public may record and take photographs, except where there are confidential or exempt items, of which I don't expect to have any today. Declarations of interest is our second item. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in that agenda item, and any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. That's the standard declaration of interest paragraph that applies to all Birmingham City Council meetings. In addition, for planning, you may see members declare an interest because they've expressed a view on an application previously, and if that's the case, then they will withdraw from the meeting. Apologies, I have apologies today from Councillors Cornish, Johnson, Scott and Beecham. Chair's announcements, all I've got is the dates of the next meeting, which are August the 19th, September the 2nd and September the 16th. Which means we get 3 meetings in September. If my arithmetic's correct, yes, it is. And we're on to the minutes already. So we've had the minutes of the 22nd of July circulated. Are you prepared to agree those? Thank you. Which brings us on to planning applications, which we do take in geographical groups, but unusually today we've got all 4 areas represented, but only 1 application from each. Item 6, do we have our objector now? No, we still don't have our objector. Okay, I'm going to flip 6 and 7, where we have speakers on both of them, but our objector for 6 is not here with us yet. So I'm going to go to the south area first. I think that's the furthest I can move 6 down the agenda is for it to follow 7. So we're going to start with item 7, which is land at Malcolm Grove off Leach Green Lane, Rubery. We'll take any updates, then hear our speakers against and for the application. Then we'll have an officer response to those comments, and then I'll open it up to members. So Louise, do we have any updates on item 7?
No updates on this item, thank you.
Okay, in that case, I'll hand over to Sean then to manage the speaking time, because we do have an objector and someone supporting the application on this one.
Thanks, Chair. We've got Mr. Boswell here.
Yes.
Mr. Boswell, you've got 3 minutes. I will just jump in 15 seconds just before the end, just to remind you, give you a chance to wrap up. But whenever you'd like to start.
Okay, you have to bear with me, I'm not used to this. I'm Graham Boswell and I live at 23 Malcolm Road and have done for the last 47 years. The green you are proposing to develop is part of our heritage within that road. We have held Queen's birthday celebrations, we have played cricket, football, badminton and other games on that green. Our children have always used the green for their fun and enjoyment. We have celebrated numerous community meetings on the green. Now, if you look at photograph 4 on the planning officer's report, you will see the devastation already caused by cutting the 2 large trees down. This is the only green area we feel safe. Our local park is simply a meeting place for drug dealing and degenerates. Birmingham City Council are in the process of building hundreds of houses, one on the roadside, one at the back of Hollymore Hospital, and a massive development at North Worcester Golf Club site in Hanging Lane. More green space lost to us. Central government has just signed an urgent agreement with other countries saying we need to plant more trees, more greenery. The Licky Hills, just behind where we live, has already cut down hundreds and hundreds of trees this year because of disease. I ask you to reject this proposal on environmental issues alone. If something is not done in this world soon, there will be no world left for anyone. Secondly, with regard to traffic and parking, the 2 buildings proposed are going to have 2 drop drives. Because of this, we are going to lose 4 parking spaces within that road. One resident in Leeds Green Lane already parks his car in that road 7 days a week. On a number of occasions, ambulances and dust carts have been unable to get in the road because of parked cars. Heaven help us if there is a fire emergency. So once again, I ask you to reject this proposal, this time on a safety grounds. Thank you, that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Boswell. We have Mr. Damon. Mr. Damon, you too have 3 minutes from whenever you'd like to start, and I'll jump in 15 seconds before the end.
Sure, thank you. As a company, we've taken on board residents' objections to our proposal to build 2 two-bedroom starter homes in Malcolm Road. The main objections have been parking, but this is why we've put the application in for off-road parking on site. There are also garages on Malcolm Road that belong to a lot of the houses, as well as they already have off-road parking. The ground levels will be reduced to take away the height impact, which was another issue raised. The working hours would be strictly adhered to so as not to impact on the local residents. As for the overlooking of the nursery, trees could be planted at the end of the garden. All materials used would be in keeping with the surrounding properties, having first been approved by Birmingham City Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair.
Louise, do you want to come back on those points?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you to the 2 speakers this morning. As you can see from the report, this is development on a small area of green space. It was an area that was laid out when Malcolm Road was built back in the 1970s. It's a privately owned piece of land, as you've heard, the residents have enjoyed using that space over the years and informal. The scheme is for 2 semi-detached properties, 2-bed properties with private gardens and off-street parking. We've heard that the site levels will be reduced so they're in line with the rest of Malcolm Road, and that reduces the potential for overlooking to the day nursery behind. We've also had some amended plans, seeking revisions to the internal layout, so that I know first of all bedroom room walls of the rear of the properties. Again, to ensure there's no overlooking to the day nursery. So the houses comply with all of your local standards in terms of space standards and distances. You can see from the photo that there were a couple of mature trees on the site. It is regrettable that they have been removed. They weren't protected trees, and there is a condition on to do some replacement planting within the site. Just looking at in terms of the provision of other amenity space within the area, within reasonable walking distance, there are a significant number of public facilities in terms of existing public open space. The St Chad's Park and Playground, approximately 250 metres away. There's also some open space of Kendall Rise Road and also Newman Way. Got Houghton Park within about a 20 to 25 minute walk, and Rubley Hill public open space, again about a 10-minute walk inside. So it is very well provided for in terms of existing public open space in the area. I think it would be difficult to argue that the loss of this small area had a significant impact other than a very localised impact for the people that live within Mappin Road and South. Just turning to parking, each of the plots would have one driveway parking space in front of the dwelling, and plot A also has an additional drive to the side, which could accommodate 2 more vehicles if they were to parking. That complies with your standards. Existing properties within Malcolm Grove have their own existing off-street parking. You'll see there's no objection to transportation in terms of highways. I've mentioned the trees in terms of the additional condition in terms of planting. That's covered. And I think those were the points that were raised by the objector. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Paul, Louise has mentioned that transportation raised no objections. Do you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you. Noting the comments from the residents, I'm aware of the current parking trends within Malcolm Grove. There seems to be a tendency for on-street parking to occur on the opposite side of the existing dwellings, therefore on the development side of the road. Now that's most likely due to the fact that there's no activity on that side of the road, so that tends to be the area that on-street parking would gravitate to. In terms of the proposal, yes, there would be four-way crossings to the 2 plots. Those are side-by-side crossings, so effectively that could remove 1 parking space because it would combine with those 2 crossings. Given the nature of the road, the cul-de-sac, and the curb height remaining, I would suggest that there would still be sufficient on-street parking flexibility as a result of the displacement, and therefore that would not be a reason to resist the proposal.
Thank you. I'll open that up to members then. Does anyone wish to come in? Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Let me first say I don't know this area at all, but from looking at the photographs, I can see what a lovely feature this green is in Malcolm Grove. Now, if this were public land, which I understand it's not, but if this were public land, I would want to defend the residents' right to this remaining a lovely green in their road. Now, we're always told by officers and by legal advisors that the ownership of the land doesn't matter in planning terms, that in planning is all about the use of land. So I say that I'm going to defend this piece of land for the local residents because it should be defended, because it is a good feature of the area, and therefore I, for one, will vote against this application.
Councillor Zim?
Thank you, Chair. I think as we desperately need some more of system, but and I think that's a very general place for residents because there's already residence area in there. And one, I just got worried about this one because we lost too many trees, and that should be put a more condition on that. Should be put more trees on that. But anyway, I am in favour of that. Thank you.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Chair. It's clear from the planning history that this piece of grass was created when the Grove was built, presumably for the residents to make use of and enjoy. And that's not surprising, considering now when we have housing developments, we do provide open space for part of public amenities. So I am really concerned that actually what has been presumably provided for residents to use, although I appreciate it's now in private ownership, will be lost if we were to approve this application today. We don't seem to ever create more open space. We ever just seem to keep building on it. And it is quite a substantial piece of grass, which I can understand children will want to play on, etc. So I do share the concerns raised by Councillor Ward, and I don't feel comfortable supporting this application today either.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo the sentiment of Councillor Ward and Councillor Moore, having a community asset within a grove like that, which isn't just used by, I imagine, the residents of that, the grove itself, but equally the lane that the grove sits on, is incredibly valuable for families growing up in that area, for children to be able to play safely without having to worry about how they're getting to the park, how they're getting back. And it's just kind of pulling at my heartstrings slightly that could be lost for the benefit of two dwellings, when in the short space of time that I've been on this committee, we've approved a major housing development not too far away within Northfield's constituency. So on that basis, I wouldn't be able to support the application either.
Councillor Straker-Wells.
Thank you. I have sympathy with the comments that have been made about green space and about the area which has come to be treasured, precious facility and asset by local families and children. The thing that does concern me, however, is whether a position, an objection, whether a refusal won't stand in the case of an appeal. It is privately owned, it's a Whitwall site, it has been used by the public. I don't know exactly how much green space there will be left with the construction. But the question in my mind is whether we would be seen to be acting wrongly if with its recommended approval. It seems to me there are no grounds for refusal, but whether in fact we would get into trouble to view. Thank you.
Okay, Louise, I'm going to bring you back in, and then I'm going to look to Sean and Tandit to clarify the point that Councillor Ward raised, which for me, I think, comes down to the difference between ownership and use. But I'll go to Louise first.
Yes, thank you, Chair, thank you, members. Just in respect of the issue of the ownership, this is a private piece of land. It's not owned by the City Council. And regardless of this application, whatever the outcome of this application is, whether it's approved or refused, the land could in theory be fenced off. Fence up to a metre in height without permission. Want to be higher than that, seek permission from us and the visual amenity. So in effect, that would prevent, if it wanted to, any public access onto that land regarding this application. So I think that needs to be borne in mind in terms of your determination. Just in terms of loss of open space and amenity space, we adopted policy T9, where you would look, and that refers to both public and private open space. And what we look at is what the existing provision in that area is, whether the loss of this particular piece of land would bring that ratio down to an unacceptable level. As I've set out to you earlier, there is significant existing public open space and amenity space within the area and within the reasonable living system. I do think that if the application was refused and the loss of amenity space, we would slowly prevent that at an appeal, particularly given the balance and the need that we have as a city for housing that can be put back into the mix. That's why we've got the recommendation from office is to approve the application. We do accept, obviously, that people live within that road. That is going to be a loss of piece of amenity space right on their doorstep.
Thank you. Sean, Tandit, do either of you or both of you want to come in on that particular point?
Yes, Chair, I can. I think Councillor Ward is correct. Land ownership isn't the issue here. And you've been told that previously, and I'll repeat that now. I think where there's a bit of confusion, or where there could be a bit of confusion, is this issue between public open space and private land, because that tends to relate to land ownership, in that historically public open space is owned by the local authority. These days that's not the case anymore. There's a lot of public open space that's owned by the landowners or developers, or a residents committee made up of the residents who live on an estate. Historically, local authorities would adopt open space and then they'd look after it, and the cost of that would be absorbed by the council. Very often these days, because of the adoption and maintenance costs, you'll see residents have to form residents committees to manage their own open space, but it's still public open space. So what we're looking at is this public open space? Now, looking back on the original planning permission, what I would ask Louise is what conditions were put in place on that original planning permission, and whether there were any that restricted its use. It would appear not. There were conditions related to its landscaping, but not necessarily to its use. So what we've got here is a piece of land that's not public open space. And that's the difference in land use terms. So the comments have been made about it's an attractive piece of land. It's a nice bit of grass for kids to play in. What you heard from the officer is that in terms of play space, because that is important, there are other provisions. And what this piece of land is a landscaped piece of land within an estate. And it's a question, to what extent can we protect an area of landscaping rather than open space that's there for the public to use? Clearly the trees that were there were important. That it is an issue that they've been felled. But what we're looking at now is a piece of land, and can we protect it just because of its landscape value? And what you've heard is that because that landscape value and impact is only very local, it's probably difficult to justify that appeal. So I think we would struggle. If it was a wider landscape feature, or a more important landscape feature for the wider public benefit, then we would be able to make a stronger case. So I think that's where we're at, and that's why you have the recommendation in front of you. Don't know if that helps. Thank you.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful for Sean's explanation, and I'm pleased to have confirmation that ownership is not the issue here, and therefore I retain my reservations about approval, so I shall vote against.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to comment or ask any further questions? Councillor Stanford.
Chair, I wonder if we might have this information, but does whoever is maintaining the land for a period of 500 years, does that affect what the land is considered as, whether it's used or not? I wonder if we know who's been maintaining the land and putting the grass over the last 50 years or so.
I'm guessing it's the landowner. When the estate was built, it would appear that this was a landscaped area where and it's not uncommon. And that's a difference between public open space and incidental areas of landscaping. And very often those incidental areas of landscaping are owned and maintained by the people that live next to them. We're all familiar with a landscape strip on the corner of a road. It's kept open and it's probably owned by the immediate neighbour. And then years later we get pressures to try and include that within the garden. The difference in this case is it's quite a big chunk that's in the centre of the housing. So I think it's probably been looked after by the local residents. I have to say, I have come across other instances where pieces of land like this are looked after by the council, and the council just doesn't realise it shouldn't. So I wouldn't be completely confident in saying who's looked after it. The other issue is that obviously from what Louisa said, that this land, as private land, could be fenced off. That would still mean that its landscape value is still the same, but nobody will be allowed on it.
Anyone else? No, I'm afraid you don't get to come back. Okay. Are you ready to vote on this one then? I'm not seeing anyone to the contrary. Can I see those in favour of the application? I'm seeing 7 in favour. Those against? 3 against. That doesn't leave anybody to abstain. So that's 7 in favour, 3 against, and that is approved. Thank you. I'm going to go back to item 6 now. Any sign of our objector? It is nearly past, so I am going to proceed with item 6. That means that the person who's come to speak in favour of the application won't get an opportunity, I'm afraid, to speak. Julie's moving, but I think it's just to identify the exit door. No, so we will be taking item 6 without speakers. This one is Northwest, so it's Pete. Do you have updates, Pete? I believe you do.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Chair. I've got a number of updates. I would like to start with a couple of amendments to the conditions within reporting committee members. Starting with condition 10, we would like this condition to read a minimum clearance of 4.1 metres rather than 2.1 metre as currently identified in the report. Secondly, would like condition 6 to be amended. So condition 6 relates to submission of material samples. We'd like to include the provision of white painted brickwork or render to the flank wall of the side of the new buildings to improve light reflecting through to the existing side windows of the neighbouring properties. Now, in terms of additional representations received on the application since the publication of the officer report, we've received 8 additional objections from local residents. These cover issues to do with emergency vehicles. An ambulance requires a minimum height of 2.9 metres and a fire appliance is 3.3 metres high. Vans and caravans would be unable to pass under the access. An access width of less than 4.5 metres will not allow two-way traffic. There are inaccurate claims that access is available between numbers 75 and 77 Kirkwood Avenue, which is to the rear of the site. The water supply and the main stop valve is on the application site. There are inaccurate claims over crime and antisocial behaviour, the proximity of the new houses and loss of privacy to neighbours, the maintenance of the side elevation, a gap of 1.5 metre would be better. Access to gates and garages have been enjoyed for 28 years and these would be blocked off as a result of this development. Gates to rear gardens would open out onto passing traffic on the new access road. The proposal would create the terracing effect and also surface treatment and the bad state of repair to the current access road. Also, there's a standalone dwelling to the rear of number 466 with no access from the front off Chester Road. Officers have also received photos illustrating some of the above that I've just described, but also the internal arrangement of number 444 Chester Road, which is next door to the application site. This does actually show that the dining room to the rear of the front lounge is actually a separate room, which is incorrectly identified on the submitted plan and also attached in the officer's report. So the dining room to the rear of the lounge is a separate room, and the rear part of the ground floor side window is the only source of natural light and outlook to that room. Representation has also been received from solicitors on behalf of 17 residents along Chester Road, advising that the proposal would interfere with the right to pass and repass with or without vehicles over and along the access way. Finally, a supplementary response has been received from Councillor Rob Pocock, recognising a better standard to the proposal, but outstanding issues to side windows and height clearance for caravans and emergency vehicles need to be addressed. Now, just in response to those additional updates, just like to emphasise a few points for the benefit of the members. To do with the height of the access under the flat, this is 4.1 metres. So the proposal would achieve a minimum clearance distance of 4.1 metres. West Midlands Fire Service, for example, require for their vehicles, for their fire appliances, they require 3.7 metres wide and 4.1 metres high. So it's of adequate height to enable a fire appliance to gain access through. Neither transportation nor the West Midlands Fire Service have raised an objection to this. The dwellings are accessible from Chester Road and there are no dwellings to the rear of the site. In terms of the access width, a minimum of 4.1 metres would allow two-way traffic. The water wall distance under the access under the flat is around 4.6 metres, so it does meet that minimum 1 metre width distance. In terms of the access being available off Kirkwood Avenue to the rear, the local planning authority, officers have assessed the proposal on the basis that there is not an access from Kirkwood Avenue. The applicant has provided details of police incident reports submitted. I believe they related to theft of motor vehicles. A number of the other points relating to drainage, proximity of the new houses, loss of privacy, maintenance, the terrace impact have all been addressed in the officer report. Just in terms of the new information relating to the internal arrangement at 444 Chester Road and the evidence that the dining room is a separate room. This clearly changes the level of harm to neighbour amenity in the plan balance, which is discussed in the officer report in front of you. What does remain is that the previous works to number 444 have changed the dining room from what would originally have been a rear reception room, like is currently seen at number 446, to a more centrally located room that is reliant on what was a secondary window to the side overlooking a private access, shared access to the room's to becoming the room's main source of natural light and outlook. The harm to this room and neighbour amenity is much greater than indicated in the officer report, so that's a very important point to note. However, officers have looked again at the planning balance. The benefit of the scheme are the same, that is in terms of developing the underutilised housing, the timing of design, but also securing the access and rear of properties to the rear of Chester Road. It's also important to note the impact on number 444's other living space to the rear and front, notwithstanding the issue to do with the dining room, would not be adversely affected. So officers do recognise that there is harm, there is quite significant harm to that one room, but taking all the matters into account, officers do feel it's finely balanced, and officers do feel that the benefits would identify the harm, the identified harm. Just finally, to do with the access around the back and the access between number 444 and 446, legislation does not override other people's property right away. The applicant's responsibility to ensure that they have the right to undertake the work. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And can I just remind everyone that our usual practice is on conditions when they're brought forward as part of the updates, that we take those as part of the report unless anybody's got an issue with them. So we're now looking at the report with those additional conditions. Questions, comments? No? Nobody's got anything to add on this one. Okay, so having studied the report and heard the updates, are you ready to vote? Yep, can I see those in favour of this development? I make that 10 in favour, which is everybody who is voting. Therefore, there's no space for anyone to be voting against or abstaining, and that is approved. Thank you. We move on to item 8. We change to the east area. Tony, if you're staying back there, you really are going to have to project because the microphone's down here. This is land at the former Birmingham Distribution Centre on Landor Street. Are there any updates?
No updates, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Anyone wish to comment or ask a question on this one? Okay, having studied the report, are you ready to vote? Those in favour? That's 10, so that's everybody, so that is unanimously approved. Changing areas again, for the last time to the city centre area. Nick is going to present on Aston University's new building on Aston Street. Are there any updates, Nick?
There are no updates, thank you, Chair.
Okay, nothing new. Anyone wish to comment on this one or ask any questions? Martin.
It's a question. And the design is actually great. I no longer have it. And it's an resting design. But I just wanted reassurance, just in case I got it wrong. It is glass behind the structure that we can see, so there'll be fair amount of light coming through, and it will also be well insulated. Thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to welcome the fact that we don't have another box. We've got too many boxes in Birmingham, so it's nice to have something. It's a bit garish, but it's different, so that's nice to see.
Anybody else? No? Nick?
Thank you. Yeah, so it is glass at the top end. The sawtooth arrangement that you're seeing is formed out of spandrel panels and glass. So very light and airy, above a concrete lid, double height concrete lid. And then in terms of sustainability, you'll see in the report that Aston University haven't gone down the standard BREEAM route, but they have submitted an alternative strategy which has been independently assessed that demonstrates that it's a very sustainable building, and I think unusually for a building of this nature, it's naturally ventilated, so it won't rely on mechanical ventilation. So officers are of the view, and that's been supported independently, but it's a very sustainable building.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment? Councillor Zing.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's very useful for the students when they are bored or anything like that. They want to take easy time for that, and I think that's very useful for them. And the other thing is, there is board on that because some who people go in there, they can use these facilities. I think that's very useful, and I'm fully supportive about this. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Stanford.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very short question. I'm just wondering, with the addition of this building in that space, is there sufficient open space around it to still have that kind of university forum with the campus?
Nick?
Okay, yes, so as you'll see, this is the first major move by the university in implementing their master plan that they prepared last year, summer of last year, and there's a whole bigger picture at play here, and I think one of the biggest moves that this will enable is the demolition of the south wing on the main building, and I think that will reposition where that that central space is, because at the moment it's quite offset into the campus. So yes, it's part of a bigger picture, and that plays into the plans and strategy as well. And the fact that they're moving the tipping fountains as well, so that plays into that.
Anyone else? Councillor Silverman.
It's not a question, it's just a comment. Just like to do some of the comments that have been made before. I think it's a really interesting addition to the university. I think it's really nice. Visually, the design is really nice. Yeah, I think it's a really good addition to that area.
Okay. Are you ready to vote then? Yep. Okay. Can I see those in favour? And again, that's 10 in favour, so that is unanimously approved. Thank you. And nobody made any comments about wedding cakes. So thank you for that. Okay then, on to item 10, which is other urgent business, which won't wait till next time. Councillor Moore, you've got a petition for us, which
Yes,
I've agreed to take under this item.
I've been given a petition from Councillor Tim Huxtable, who's asked me to present it today. It's regarding residents of Hall Green South Ward who wish to prevent the conversion of, I think it's 26 Primrose Croft, I believe it is, reading his handwriting, and be converted into a house of multiple occupation. So if officers can consider that petition, please.
If you can hand that to Louise, is it your patch or is it far enough east? Julie will sort it. Julie and Louise will sort it. Thank you for that. Does anyone else have any urgent business that won't wait till next time? No? In that case, we're on to item 11, which is the authority between meetings for the chair to act jointly with the relevant chief officer to act on behalf of the committee. Is that agreed? Thank you very much. That's it for this morning. Thank you.